My name is Susan Supernavage, and I'm a principal consultant with Corporate Visions. My role is to provide strategic guidance to our clients like Wipro as they are on their transformation journeys. You're here today to hear from Thierry Van Herwijen, and he's going to go over that name pronunciation a little later. But anyway, I have known Thierry for 4 years, and I found him to be an incredibly innovative thinker and really a person who's relentlessly committed to making the lives of sellers easier through sales enablement. Thierry is also a thought leader in the area of sales enablement and runs a popular blog and podcast called salesenablementlab.com. So without any further ado, here you go, Thierry.
Thank you, Susan. I hope you had a good lunch. Doing a presentation after lunch is always interesting, so I'll try to get you engaged and keep you entertained. As Susan says, my name is Thierry Van Herwijnen. And yes. Oh, okay. You want me to speak up a little bit? Is that better? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, the mic is on, but I don't think there is any amplification in the room, basically. So. This is actually how you pronounce it. So the question I get a lot is, okay, that's great, but how do you pronounce this? So first name is actually French, last name is actually very Dutch. I work for Wipro, and for those of you who don't know Wipro, let me set the context a little bit. At Wipro, we're committed to help our customers basically go through their digital transformation journey. It's a pretty large organization. We do that through 3 pillars. We do that through basically consultancy. We do that through helping our customers implement technology. And we do that through outsourcing. It's 173,000 people, so a pretty heavily matrixed organization. We're in 100+ different countries. And we serve basically 25 different verticals, 30+ different practices. And those practices basically create more than 500 different offerings. My role there is to be the head of global sales knowledge services. So basically what I do together with my team is capture all that knowledge in the organization and really bring that out to the different sales organizations. And if you look at our sales organization, out of the 173,000, roughly 3,800 of them have like a quota carrying role. The rest of them are there to basically develop the solutions, provide support. So compared to the overall number, it's a small sales organization, basically. The thing I learned when I joined this organization 2 years ago is, I came actually from Cisco. Some of you might have seen me present about Cisco and the journey we went through 2 years ago, is that the sales model we use at Wipro is actually almost the opposite. So when you work for a technology company, the way you enable your sales teams is that typically the first 80% of the sales journey is pretty standard, right? And the tailorization happens in the end, and actually often happens by the channel partner, right? At Wipro, what we do is we actually tailor-make the solutions for every single customer. These solutions are pretty big. They're somewhere in the range between a few $100,000 to maybe 50, 100, $150 million. So you understand that there is very large teams involved in actually crafting those solutions. So on an annual basis, we craft a bit more than 20,000 of these like highly specific tailorized engagements. And the model we use is very much a solution approach. As I said, one of the big pillars we have is a consultancy. So we very much lead with a consultancy type of engagement. So there are 3 areas I want to cover today. I want to talk a little bit about sales knowledge management at Wipro. How does it work? What are the processes we have developed together with Corporate Visions, and how are we implementing them? And then share with you some of the key takeaways of our learnings as well. We're going through that journey. The first question I asked myself when I joined this organization was, okay, why are we actually doing this investment in sales knowledge management, right? Sales knowledge management at Wipro is part of the overall sales enablement organization. So within sales enablement at Wipro, we roughly have somewhere between 200 to 230 people be part of that overall organization. My organization alone is 63 people. So why are we actually doing that heavy investment in sales enablement and sales knowledge services? And that's because the world of sales has dramatically changed. And I know it's true for you here in the room as well, but let's go over some of the numbers to justify that, right? So for us, on average now, we have 11 different touch points before a decision is made by a buyer. So all the way from the starting of the beginning of that relationship, all the way to that purchase decision, there are typically 11 touch points. And that sales cycle can be anywhere between 6 months to probably 2 years. So that's a heavy investment from our side. There are 6.4 stakeholders involved in that buying decision. And the key point there is they're not all at the same page, basically, right? Somebody might already have made up their mind and be ready to buy that solution, whereas somebody else is maybe at the beginning of that engagement, right? So our role and the role of my team is to really make sure that we create the materials to bring everyone along on that journey and realize that people might be at different stages of that journey at different times, even if they're in the same company. 43% of the buyers typically already made up their mind before they had their first engagement, right? So if you're not early in that conversation, typically those buyers already made up their opinion. And then also, now 90% of our customers actually initiate that first step. So relationship building and making sure that even if that opportunity isn't there yet, building that relationship is critical. So on top of that, what we're educating our teams on and what we're enabling our teams on is really making sure that they engage in that conversation as early as possible. So maybe a show of hands who joined Tim's session yesterday, the bonus session. So he talked pretty heavily about inside selling, right? So that's one of the things we're heavily adopting and we're building out in the organization. So that's a little bit about the external content. So no wonder this is typically how your sales teams feel, right? And this is not just Wipro, this is typically any sales organization is, you see that salesperson, which is the elephant, they have this beautiful opportunity, which is the flower, right? And they're really thinking, can my organization carry this opportunity? Am I really able to work across all my different service lines, all my different verticals in my organization? And are they really able to bring those 4 or 5 solutions together and turn it into something I can sell to my organization, right? Will the organization hold me while I'm going through that journey? So our vision and the vision from my team is to really make sure that we equip our sales teams with the messages, the insights, and the tools they need to have winning sales conversations. That for us is key, right? Because we really want to equip them to have a sales conversation. Not just a technology conversation, those days are over. It's great to have a technology conversation, but it really should be around what the business value can add to the organization. So when I joined the team 2 years ago, this is kind of what I saw. I saw a huge stack of knowledge, right? So I was able to go into a portal called Catalyst, and there I would find roughly, I would say, 180,000 different assets. That already was a major achievement, right? So if you can imagine having 173,000 people going like very fast, right? Engaging with customers, working on these significant opportunities, being able to pull that knowledge out and turn that into a huge amount of assets is a tremendous effort, right? So I want to acknowledge that. The team did an amazing job building that foundation. But the challenge was that it wasn't structured. So it was hard to find content, and I will share some of the challenges later. It was hard to find content. There was barely any governance around it. So it was a big pile of knowledge, basically, right? So if you're an account manager and you had a meeting the next day, you will probably spend a few hours going through that material, trying to understand what you can leverage, and from there building your own story. So one of the things we worked on very hard for the last 2 years is really moving it towards what we call a bill of material, right? Kind of like a shopping list. Salespeople like predictability. When they go into the sales portal, they want to know what they can find there, right? If you have 800 solutions on there, they're expecting it to be structured in a way where they can very quickly engage with the content, quickly pick up what they need, and tailor that to their customer conversation. So we move towards this model of kind of like kit list, which is like the Lego sets you see there on the right? One of the things you notice is they kind of all look the same, right? The logo is all on the top left corner. There is a picture on the box that will tell you the age. And even if you open up the typically nicely designed boxes, it's standardized in the way they're packaged, right? There's a manual in there which will tell you the different steps you need to go through to build that Lego set. And typically nowadays, when I was playing with Lego 40 years ago, it was all like bumped into a big box. Right now, typically it's packaged in a way where it's easy to kind of like follow the process and put the right pieces together. So that's kind of our vision we had, is how do we move to these Lego sets which are easy to engage with. So as I said, it has been a bit of a journey. When I picked up the team, we're probably in kind of like the beginning of the second stage, right? The foundation was there. There was great content there. We had a relationship with the business, so we knew who to talk with to curate that knowledge. But then we started the process of standardization. So we went to the sales organization. We'll share a lot about it a little bit more later, and really ask them the question, what is it you need? And then out of that came a set of templates, a set of processes, really helped us to go to that second stage, which is what we call the adoption and message supply chain optimization. Last year, roughly around this time, we kicked off the third stage, which was around sales insights, right? So what we learned yesterday is, if you want to engage with your customer earlier, you need to share them memorable insights, right? You need to give them something they didn't know yet, and then also give them the solution to that challenge. So that's what we're trying to do through that sales insights organization. Where we're planning to go is to build on that foundation then and really create the alignment between sales and marketing. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, how we're going to do that. We want to become more active on social. Most of my colleagues aren't that active on social. I think that's a huge opportunity for us. And also we want to leverage this basis to do more demand generation, basically. So how's the organization structured? So as I said, it's roughly 63 people here, the different departments in my team. The first block you see on the top is the sales knowledge managers. So that group of people has a relationship with the business. So there are 8 or 9 people there who day in, day out, talk with the service lines, they talk with the different business units in the organization and really understand their needs. They understand what launches do we have coming up, what are the key messages we need to get out, where are the gaps, who is engaging in that organization, who's not engaging in that organization, where are we creating content, where are we not creating content. And then when new content basically becomes available, they will take that content and make sure it ends up on our sales enablement platform. There are also cases where content has not been created yet. So we also now put a lot more focus on what we call sales content creation. And actually, I'm happy to say that Rajiv, who's leading that team here for me, is actually here in the organization. So this team can be asked to come in and actually do an engagement and create sales messaging. So they will sit together with, for example, the blockchain organization, something we did recently, work together with the key stakeholders across the organization and craft a Wipro-wide message on blockchain, for example. Or something Susan will talk about a little bit later, Holmes, our cognitive computing solution, for example. So they're able to facilitate that conversation, and then from there create a conversation roadmap and then turn that into collateral. Insights team I already talked about, that's the team who's creating those memorable insights and then connecting them to solutions. There's a team, one or two I probably want to combine together, market competitive intelligence and account intelligence. What these guys do is what I thought pretty astounding. Imagine you have a meeting in 3 days from now with a company, right? And you know the key executives you're going to meet. You can send that team an email, and within 2 to 3 days, they will turn around a full profile, which is typically 50 to 60 PowerPoint slides. What the organization is about, what's their key care about, who are the executives you're meeting, what is it they're doing on social, what are the key messages they shared, et cetera, et cetera. So that team, for example, when we do yearly account planning, they're able to create those profiles for the top 200 accounts, I would probably say roughly in a month. It takes a lot of pizza, takes a lot of very long working hours, but they're able to pull it off. They did it now twice. And then in addition to that, we have people focused on the business architecture, so the sales enablement platform, and then obviously some people focused on business operations. So what are the challenges we're facing? Well, first of all, content is created across the entire organization, including the sales teams, which is kind of good and it's bad, right? There is some amazing content being created by the sales teams, right? There's some beautiful examples there of well-crafted messages. But in all honesty, it's also not what you want, right? You want your sales team to be in front of the customer. I have nothing against tailorizing presentations and making it specific for a customer, right? I think everyone should do that. But you don't want your people to spend 60, 70% of their time crafting their own presentations. Limited standardization, no consistent approach. I remember the big pile of Lego bricks I shared. Limited governance, so at some stage you will end up then with a lot of very old, outdated content, a situation I had to deal with probably like a year ago. Limited accountability and limited measurement. And actually, it's really hard to predict, right? Building that library is one thing, but can you really accurately predict how many people you need to maintain that library and keeping it up to date? And also budget for it, right? So, I'm not sure if Amar is already here in the room, but Amar, our Senior Vice President of Strategic Engagements, came to me a few months ago and he said, we're launching what we call these client themes. We need 40 messages to be created. How quickly can you do it and how much will it cost us, right? And because we have a pretty good grip now on what we need to create, we're fairly able to give him different models, say, okay, this is how it will cost you if you do it internally. This is how much it will cost if we outsource it, and here is kind of like a hybrid model where we do some through agencies, and this is how much it will cost you and how much time it will take you. So how did we start on this journey? So in all fairness, this is the second time I did this. I did this as well for Cisco, so I had a little bit of experience doing this. So we took a similar approach, which was we went back to the roots and we asked our salespeople. And out of that came two areas they needed help with. Area number one is you need help us to prepare, right? So I have a meeting next week, 2 weeks, maybe tomorrow. Help me to prepare as efficient as possible for that meeting. Help me to talk the right language of that customer, right? Probably one of the hardest things to do, right? A lot of salespeople, including myself in my early days, were afraid to talk with the C-suite, with executives. Not because they didn't know how to position Wipro or the technologies we sell, but how do you do that in the context of that executive? So they want material which is industry specific, has the right market intelligence in it, so they can quickly engage in that conversation. It needs to be ready to use. Everyone hates to watch one eye the television, the other eye talk to your partner, and I don't know how you do it with your third eye, but kind of like doing your presentation in preparation for tomorrow as well, right? So everyone hates to kind of like do that on the fly. So they want ready-to-use material, something they can just grab off the portal and with some tweaks use in their engagement. They love consistency and predictability, right? So you cannot have 30 solutions documented in one way and then 31 and 32 only have like one or two content assets basically, right? At some stage you need to drive that consistency. I fully understand that that needs time and you need to do it over time, but at least in your vision, put something in there which will help you to get started on that journey. Be specific as possible to the region. Typically it doesn't make sense to share US case studies in a European market or into an Indian market, and also less is more. One of my focuses is actually to shrink that library we have, and we talk about it a little bit later. So this really helped us to provide input into that bill of materials, specifically around what is necessary there, right? What are the key elements we need to have in that bill of material in terms of assets? The second one then was around help me to be more effective. So I spent a lot of time getting that meeting with the executive. Now help me to be as successful as possible in that engagement. So, as I said in the beginning, there is no single buyer anymore. Like typically we have 6.4 people involved in a engagement. So how do you make sure that in that presentation you're doing, in that meeting you're doing, there is something for everyone? Conversation needs to be specific. And also you might go in and think that you're going to talk around security, but I can tell you, your customer will very quickly go from security to collaboration, and from collaboration to unified messaging, and from unified messaging to, I don't know, artificial intelligence, for example. So how do you make sure that people are able to switch between those conversation? They understand when to use what content during the cycle, so when do you get the biggest buck for the conversation, and also giving them the ability to share feedback. So as I said, we have more than 500 solutions across the organization. This is probably the biggest learning I had from my previous engagement with Cisco. And Fabian was actually here in my team. We were talking about this over lunch, right? Is probably one of the mistakes I made there is we went in too strict. We only gave them one model and said, this is the model you need to use, right? So one of the key learnings we had from that was, you can't do it all yourself. So the model we're implementing at Wipro is a little bit more relaxed. We're saying those top 2 boxes, the why Wipro, the why change message for Wipro, and the client themes, which are things like IoT, cloud, the big repetitive themes from customers, we will own and we will manage, right? Those are the things we need to make sure that they're so big, they're so wide across the organization, we need to make sure they're 600% because it's our bread and butter as an organization. The others, it will be kind of like a self-service model. So the same methodology we have developed for the first 2 together with CVI, we're opening up to the others. They can do it on their own. They can follow the templates, they can follow the methodology. And yes, if they need help, and yes, we have the bandwidth, Rajiv will come in with his organization and it will help to craft those messages basically. So that's kind of the model we're implementing right now. Let's go through that quickly. So we changed the process. So as I said, we put a lot more focus on governance. So we went through a model which was very focused on the content owner, very traditional model, from publish to plan to create. We went to kind of like what I call internally for us, the double donut. We went through a system where you create content and then you go into that stage of governance. So we roughly run 25 different governance processes for our content. We know exactly for every piece of content what type of piece of content it is, when is it going to expire. 3 months before it expires, the content owner gets an email. It's going to be refreshed. If they don't refresh it, we pull it off the database a month after the expiration, basically. We know when people move into the organization. So when somebody moves into a new role, he automatically gets an email saying, here are the 20 documents which are assigned to you. Are you still accountable for these documents, or do we need to find another content owner, for example? When people leave the organization, which is very unfortunate, we reach out to their manager and say, okay, you need now to find, you have 2 weeks to find a new content owner for these pieces of content, basically. So we run 25 very strict processes to really make sure that that database is accurate and is up to date, basically. I think the other key learning we had from Cisco and what I picked up from a lot of other conversations as well is you need to have one integrated marketing message. I'm not facing this too much at the moment at Wipro, but I know a lot of you are kind of like struggling between, okay, there's a lot of content which is created by marketing, there's a lot of content which is created by sales. How do you align those pieces of content? The way we have developed and designed this process is that we have one foundational message, which for us is the conversation roadmap, basically. Right, so one of the key things which come out of the process is the conversation roadmap. That is our foundation, and from there we basically build the content. So we spent a lot of time really making sure that everyone agrees to that message, everyone sticks to that message. We have full buy-in from the organization around it before we kick off the process of content development. And then we have one set of standards, right? So that bill of material, this is actually an example of that bill of material. So when you engage with us, and for those top 50 messages. This is what we're creating, basically. We're creating a business presentation, a technology presentation, a white paper, solution at a glance, a training video, and a sales playbook, for example, right? Are there exceptions? Absolutely, right? There might be cases where this is so new, there are no case studies, for example. So there are exceptions, but we're really trying to make sure that this fits for 80% the bill, basically, and make sure that we follow up. So as soon as those case studies become available, we continue to fill that library and complete that solution set. And then we make sure that we have one group which is accountable for this process, right? So my boss basically has a single throat to choke, basically, when things goes wrong, and when things get out of control and there's too much content in the library, I'm the one he reaches out to and basically get it under control again. So we roughly have 18,000 documents at the moment, so we dramatically scaled it down. My goal is to reduce this even more. We have 6,500 people, so we do sales, but also a lot of pre-sales people. We have more than 600 case studies, stories basically, right? So we heard this morning that stories are really, really important, and we try to capture them and make them available to the salespeople. And then we have intelligence assets. So those account intelligence assets, we store them, we refresh them, and make sure they're available for everyone. But also, strategic marketing uses our platform to store their assets, for example. So if you do this right, we really turn this into a repeatable, measurable process, right? And that's what we're doing right now, is making sure that every month with the service lines and the SBUs, we share with them what content is expiring, what can we expect, what is your pipeline for the coming 3 months to refresh, and where are we taking this in terms of a library point of view. Susan, why don't you share a little bit about the joint engagement we have?
We actually made some modifications to our own process for Wipro. They have an enterprise license with Corporate Vision, so they have the ability to make changes and tweak things to suit their areas. And Thierry was very, very interested in that, the metrics and measurement. And so there's some innovative things we did with the playbook, for example, to make sure that he could really track when individual sections of the playbook are used at different parts of the sales cycle, and really be able to come back and say, you know what, no one's using this asset, or hey, everyone really loves this asset, so that he can go and use his budget dollars wisely going forward in terms of what to build and what not to build. So what I brought for just an example is to show you what the templates look like for a couple of them, and then the example of how it built out. We did a test with the Holmes cognitive computing message. And so this is a template, and there's directions in there that talk about, in their case, because they use Corporate Vision stuff, where do you pick up this information from the conversation roadmap? So anybody can come in, whether they've gone to the training or not, pick up the roadmap and know where to go to get the title for the slide, to get the beginning slide. I didn't put them all in here. And then this is an example of how it gets flowed into the template. So the idea is that you don't have to think too hard, and people don't invent things that weren't part of the message. So we're trying to really balance those two things, make it easy, but make it consistent and predictable for sales. Another example is the sales guide templates. We created a mini sales guide for each one of the steps in the sales process for Wipro. And so that way, Thierry can track the downloads, make sure he understands what the usability is. And then again, the message and what's in that sales guide comes right out of the conversation roadmap. And so you can see they look very, very similar. So the template is almost a final designed asset. And that was something that was important for Thierry as well, just for speed and the ability to develop things quickly. And then the last one is just an example of another asset, a solution overview. And again, this is the template, and that's what it looks like when it's completed. So the whole idea is to really reinforce that consistency, make it easy, and yet still make it something that really works for Wipro. And so, thank you.
Great, thank you. So let's wrap it up. So what are some of the key learnings we had throughout this process? This message was reiterated time after time by the salespeople, right? They want to see consistency, and they want to see predictability, right? So And salespeople logging into the portal Sunday evening, 8 o'clock, preparing for a presentation the next morning. They want to know what to expect, right? And that's why those templates are so important to us, because once people are educated on that template, they know where the key differentiators are. They know what the elevator pitch is. They know where to find the competitive positioning, for example. So that's why we invested so much time and so much resources and money to really work on those templates, and we try to stick to them. Playing carefully, this is a beautiful library. I picked up the picture somewhere. I don't even know where the library is, but developing the library is a major achievement. Maintaining it is even more difficult, right? So imagine you have 25, 30,000 assets originally. How much time and money does it take you to make sure that content stays consistent? The question we were not able to answer 2 years ago. And now we have a very good feeling for those 18,000 assets, what the investment is, right? And if we need to roll out 30 new messages, I can predict probably within $100,000 how much money it will take us and how much time it will take us to develop that, basically. Plan for some resistance. I think another key learning we had from our former experience is you are going to encounter some resistance, right? So sometimes just take a few steps back, take a deep breath, and continue to re-educate everyone on it, and maybe do a smaller pilot, right? We kick this off by doing smaller pockets of pilots instead of trying to go big all at once, and that was a pretty successful approach. Let's do an experiment. What I didn't share with you yet is the secret sauce we use at Wipro, right? So we spend a lot of time getting you on the same page. So let me share with you actually how we do this at Wipro. So what I want you to do is follow along these steps and do it in English, and it will start to make sense at the end, right? So I want you all to think of a number between 2 and 9. Multiply your number by 9. Everyone on the same page? Then add your 2 digits together. So if you're 1 and 3, it becomes 4. If it is 5 and 2, it becomes 7. Subtract 5. Are you still there? Then match your number with the corresponding letter of the alphabet. So if you have 1, it's an A. If you have a 2, it's a B, etc., etc. Now think of a small country in Europe that starts with this letter. Think of an animal that begins with the last letter of your country's name. That's why it's important to do this in English. And then I think the last one, think of a color that begins with the last letter of your animal's name. Is everyone there, roughly? Yeah? Who's thinking about Denmark, kangaroo, and orange? A few people. So that's how we do it at Wipro. Any questions? Like what I personally believe, right, is every good sales rep should have their personal library of 50 stories, right? 50 client success stories, case studies. They know how to articulate and then can relate basically to the environment of the customer. So we currently have 650 of those stories documented. They're all in a standardized template. We have 4 people working on that. And basically the way it works is if there is an opportunity which is more than 5 million coming out of the CRM solution, my team gets an email, they engage with the client, partner, and as part of the process, they must go through a debrief with my team and we document it. In addition to that, we now started to build an insights library. So there is a lot of kind of like market data in there with proof points, and then we match it back to the solutions. And once the customer says, okay, that's really interesting, how can you help us to basically create that? Those are probably the 2 things which are the closest to that. The case studies is in a PowerPoint template. The proof points is in a PowerPoint template, and there's also a webinar we do with the subject matter expert actually presenting the data. Yeah. Yes.
2 questions. Your groups, do you break them up vertical specific, like we're a healthcare corporation, we kind of have verticals within healthcare. heard you say you focus on 80% to get there with some kind of an answer documentation. Is it 80% of all the needs of each of the division and vertical sales teams, or are you looking at 80% of the total revenue of the company, and that's where you focus your efforts?
Yeah, great question. To answer your first one, depending on the team, we break them up into a business focus. So from the people who directly engage with the business, they have a specific focus either on a set of SBUs or service lines, basically. So they are industry specific, and I want them to understand that business, right? So if I go to someone in my team who's responsible for business application services, I want them to understand that business inside out. I want to understand them how much their revenue is, what the key things they sell, what the key people to engage with, et cetera, et cetera. There's a big part in the support team. We're doing a lot of the support work, like uploading documents into the repository, tagging it, et cetera, et cetera. There we have less the need of making it industry specific. To answer your second question, yes, we do look at the top 80% of the business. That's where the primary focus is. So when I run a monthly engagement meeting with all the service lines and all the SBUs, and when we talk about gaps in their content, that's where we focus. So we say, okay, here are your 20 solutions which generate 80% of your business. 16 of them are documented well, they're up to date, et cetera, et cetera. Here are the 4 you need to update in the next 2 to 3 weeks, basically. I think I have one more question. Yeah? Okay. Sorry. Let's take somebody. Yeah, you.
Hi. So you talked about resistance.
Yes.
And I'm curious, when you talked about the required reading of case studies and team, was some of that resistance met there when you were first starting out? And so, how do you feel about that?
So from a process point of view, the biggest resistance we got at the beginning of the process was on the conversation roadmap. Simply because it's kind of like a document in the middle, which we don't share with the sales teams. So when you share that with the team, and Rajiv can tell you all the war stories around that in the break, but they don't want to do it because it's not something which is like a final product. So they're like, oh, let's jump directly into like filling in the templates, right? Which works well if you have one person doing all the 20 templates or all the 8 templates, basically. But if you have different groups creating those templates, that foundational messaging is really, really important. It's also much simpler to circulate that and get key stakeholders to sign off on it. That's where you encounter typically pushback. The solution to that is you need to own that yourself. Don't give that template to the other group and say, please fill it in. Own it, drive it, lead it, and make sure you take accountability for it. And then once you have done that and you pull that information out of the subject matter experts, then you can start the content creation process. Do we get resistance from account managers who don't want to share their story? Yes. Worst case scenario, you build in the process that they don't get their commission until they share the story. So you can do it the easy way, you can do it the tough way. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm around later, so if there's any more questions, feel free to chat.